The Central Academic Forum of the Galactic Coalition had never been this crowded. Every seat, every standing space, every floating observation platform held someone desperate to witness what was about to happen. I adjusted my sensory stalks nervously, watching the holographic displays flicker to life around the massive auditorium. My name is Cor Venix, and I serve as the administrative chronicler for the Coalition's Educational Exchange Program. In my 43 cycles of service, I had documented thousands of academic competitions, cultural exchanges, and intellectual demonstrations. None of them compared to today. The human delegation had arrived 3 hours ago. 3 hours. Most species took weeks to acclimate to Coalition standard environments. The Vrothians needed specialized breathing apparatus for a full lunar cycle before they could participate in public forums. The Kelmorians required temperature adjustments that took days to implement properly. The humans? They stepped off their transport vessel, looked around the docking bay, and one of their representatives actually said, "Neat. Neat," as if they had just walked into a moderately interesting museum instead of the most advanced space station in 7 sectors. "The competition will begin shortly," announced Coordinator Hess Talum through the Chamber's audio network. His voice carried that particular tone of barely contained excitement mixed with dread. We all knew what was at stake today. Professor Zin-Karath had issued the challenge 6 months ago. The most brilliant mind in Coalition space, a Nexarian genius whose intellect had revolutionized everything from quantum mechanics to philosophical frameworks. His cognitive capacity had been measured at levels that made other species weep with inadequacy. He had single-handedly solved mathematical theorems that had stumped the greatest minds for generations. And he had publicly declared that humanity's recent admission to the Coalition was a mistake. "They are primitive," he had announced during a live broadcast that reached 400 billion viewers across the galaxy. "Their technology is borrowed, their science is derivative, their achievements are modest at best. They contribute nothing to our collective knowledge that we have not already surpassed millennia ago." The human ambassador had responded within an hour. Not with anger, not with diplomatic deflection, but with a simple statement that made my translator unit glitch 3 times before rendering it properly. Bet. Just that. One word. Bet. The professor had been confused. The entire Coalition had been confused. What did gambling have to do with an intellectual discussion? The human ambassador had clarified with a message that I had memorized because of how audacious it was. "You think we're not smart enough to hang with the big kids? Fine. Pick your best and brightest. We'll pick one of ours. Any challenge you want. Mathematics, physics, engineering, philosophy, abstract, reasoning, pattern analysis. Whatever. We win. You publicly apologize and admit humans deserve to be here. You win, we'll shut up about the whole thing for a decade." Professor Zin-Karath had accepted immediately, probably expecting to face one of Earth's top scientists, one of their decorated professors, someone with credentials and decades of study. The humans had sent a 16-year-old girl named Maya Torres. I watched her now as she entered the competition chamber. She wore simple clothing by human standards, something called jeans and a shirt, with text that read, "I paused my game for this." Her hair was pulled back in what my cultural database identified as a ponytail. She carried nothing except a small bag and a beverage container covered in stickers. She looked bored. Professor Zin-Karath stood on the opposite side of the chamber, surrounded by floating data tablets, holographic interfaces, and enough computational support to run a small planet's infrastructure. He had prepared for this moment with the kind of intensity usually reserved for military campaigns. Maya took a sip from her beverage container and yawned. "The rules are simple," Coordinator Hess Talum explained to the assembled audience. "Both competitors will be presented with a series of challenges across multiple disciplines. Each challenge will be timed. The competitor who solves the most challenges correctly in the shortest time will be declared the winner." Professor Zin-Karath's 4 eyes gleamed with confidence. His reputation demanded nothing less than absolute victory. The betting pools across the coalition heavily favored him at ratios of approximately 200 to 1. Maya stretched her arms above her head and cracked her knuckles. The sound echoed unnaturally loud in the silent chamber. "Competitors ready?" Hess Talum asked. "Ready," the professor declared formally. "Yeah, sure," Maya said, pulling out a small rectangular device from her pocket. "Just let me turn off my phone so I don't get distracted." The professor's sensory stalks twitched in what I recognized as barely suppressed amusement. A phone. She was worried about a communication device being a distraction during the most important intellectual competition in recent coalition history. "Challenge 1, Hess Talum announced. Quantum probability matrices. Calculate the likelihood of simultaneous particle decay in a 14-dimensional space with variable temporal constants." The holographic display activated, showing an impossibly complex equation that filled the entire wall of the chamber. Numbers, symbols, and mathematical notations in 17 different languages cascaded across the screen. Professor Zin-Karath immediately began interfacing with his computational tools, his 6 manipulator appendages moving with practiced precision across the holographic controls. Maya looked at the wall for approximately 7 seconds. 4.37%, she said. The chamber fell silent. Even Professor Zin-Karath stopped his calculations. "I'm sorry?" Hess Talum said. 4.37%, Maya repeated, taking another sip of her beverage. "With a margin of error around 0.02 because of the recursion factor in the 9th dimension. It's basically just a modified version of the Schrödinger equation, if you account for the temporal variable creating feedback loops. Not that complicated, honestly." The verification system processed her answer. Correct. Time elapsed. 9.3 seconds. Professor Zin-Karath's eyes widened, all 4 of them. He had not even finished setting up his calculation parameters. "Perhaps a fluke," he said, though his voice carried less certainty than before. "The next challenge will be more appropriate." "Challenge 2, Hess Talum announced, and I could hear the surprise in his voice. "Engineering problem. Design a propulsion system capable of achieving 0.97 light speed, using only the materials present in a standard Class M asteroid. You have 15 minutes. Professor Zin-Karath immediately began sketching designs in the holographic space, his knowledge of physics and engineering evident in every precise line and calculation. Maya pulled out a piece of actual paper from her bag and a writing instrument. Paper. Physical, archaic, cellulose-based information storage material. She started drawing. I watched, fascinated, as her hand moved across the paper with confident strokes. She was not sketching random ideas or testing theories. She was drawing the complete design from memory, as if she had solved this exact problem before. 3 minutes later, she held up her paper to the scanning system. The holographic display rendered her design in 3 dimensions. It was elegant, efficient, and completely functional. The propulsion system used a magnetic field configuration that I had never seen before, but the mathematics supported it perfectly. It would work. Professor Zin-Karath was still on his preliminary calculations. Time, Hess Talum called. Maya Torres's design is verified as functional with an efficiency rating of 92%. Professor Zin-Karath's design is incomplete. The professor's skin pigmentation shifted to a color my database identified as indicating stress. This is impossible. She cannot simply know these things without computation, without time to analyze the variables. Maya shrugged. I mean, we covered propulsion theory in my physics class last semester. And I helped my dad rebuild a car engine last summer, so the basic principles are kind of the same. You just scale up and account for the whole no air in space thing. Challenge 3, Hess Talum continued. And now I detected definite entertainment in his tone. The coordinator was enjoying this. Abstract philosophy. Explain the resolution to the paradox of infinite recursion as it applies to consciousness and self-awareness. This was the professor's specialty. He had written 4 books on consciousness theory. This was his moment to reclaim dominance. The paradox resolves when one considers that consciousness is not a fixed state, but rather a continuous process of self-reference that exists outside traditional temporal constraints. The professor began, warming to his subject. The apparent recursion is actually a linear progression, when viewed from a higher dimensional perspective, where time becomes a spatial coordinate rather than a flowing phenomenon. The self-awareness emerges not from the recursion itself, but from the meta-analysis of the recursive process, creating a stable loop of observation and existence that... He continued for 4 minutes, laying out an argument that was sophisticated, well-reasoned, and deeply researched. Maya waited until he finished. Then she spoke. Yeah, but that doesn't really solve it, does it? Because you're still assuming consciousness needs an observer, even if that observer is itself. The real answer is way simpler. The paradox only exists if you think consciousness is a thing instead of a process. Like, you don't ask where a river is when all the water molecules have been replaced. It's still a river. The recursion is just what consciousness does, not what it is. The loop isn't the problem, it's the point. Asking consciousness to explain itself is like asking a song why it sounds like music. The question assumes a separation that doesn't exist. Silence filled the chamber. Professor Zin-Karath's 4 eyes blinked in sequence, a sign of deep cognitive processing. That is, he said slowly, actually a more elegant framework than the standard resolution. Cool, Maya said. She checked her phone, despite having turned it off earlier. Apparently, she had turned it back on. Are we doing more of these? Or can I get some food? I didn't eat breakfast, and I'm starving. Challenge 4, Hess Talum said, and I heard disbelief entering his voice. Pattern analysis. Identify the underlying structure in this data sequence. The holographic display filled with what appeared to be complete randomness. Numbers, colors, shapes, symbols, from dozens of different languages and mathematical systems, all jumbled together in a sequence that hurt to look at. This was a coalition-level intelligence test, the kind given to identify potential savants and geniuses. The average time to solve it was 4 hours. The fastest recorded time was 47 minutes. Maya stared at it for maybe 20 seconds. It's prime numbers, she said. I beg your pardon? Hess Talum replied. Prime numbers. The sequence is just prime numbers written in different base systems and encoded in whatever symbols or colors correspond to those values in each system. Like, that blue hexagon is 211 in base 7 Vrothian mathematical notation. The weird squiggle next to it is 223 in Kelmorian artistic numbers. The whole sequence is just primes going up. Honestly, kind of obvious once you realize each symbol system has internal consistency. The verification system took longer to confirm this answer than Maya had taken to solve it. Correct. Time elapsed. 23 seconds. Professor Zin-Karath stood completely still. His computational devices floated uselessly around him, their holographic interfaces still displaying incomplete analysis of the first pattern. "How?" he asked simply. Maya shrugged again. It seemed to be her default response to everything. "Pattern recognition, I guess? Humans are pretty good at that. We used to have to spot predators in tall grass and figure out which berries would kill us. Makes you good at seeing patterns where they shouldn't be. Plus, I do a lot of puzzle games on my phone when I'm bored in class. Same basic skills." "Challenge 5, Hestalum announced, though he sounded almost apologetic now. Multidimensional spatial reasoning. Navigate this virtual maze that exists in 7 dimensions simultaneously while maintaining awareness of your position in all dimensions. Standard time limit is 2 hours. The holographic display shifted, becoming an impossible geometric nightmare that made my visual processing centers ache. Maya pulled out her phone again. She said, "Do you have this in, like, app form? Because trying to manipulate a 7-dimensional space with 3-dimensional controls seems annoying." Hestalum actually laughed. "Yes, we can transfer it to your device." 30 seconds later, Maya was swiping through the 7-dimensional maze on her phone screen like she was playing a casual mobile game. Her fingers moved with practiced ease, sliding between dimensional layers, rotating perspectives, mapping pathways that should have been impossible to visualize. "Done," she said after 4 minutes. "That was actually kind of fun. Is there a harder version?" The audience had stopped murmuring. We were beyond shock now, entering territory that did not have adequate emotional categories. Professor Zin-Karath slowly deactivated his computational systems. The holographic interfaces blinked out one by one, leaving him standing alone in the chamber's lights. "I concede," he said quietly. "Wait, what?" Maya looked up from her phone, genuine surprise on her face. "We're done? But there were supposed to be like 20 challenges, right? I barely got started." "I concede," the professor repeated, louder this time. "I have spent 3 centuries accumulating knowledge, studying under the greatest minds in Coalition space, expanding my consciousness through genetic modification and cybernetic enhancement. And I have been thoroughly defeated by a human child who is annoyed that we interrupted her recreational activities." He turned to face Maya directly. "How is this possible?" Maya looked uncomfortable with the attention. "I mean, I'm not that special. There are way smarter kids at my school. I'm just good at taking tests. My actual grades are kind of mid because I forget to turn in homework and stuff." This answer seemed to disturb Professor Zin-Karath more than the defeat itself. "You are not exceptional by human standards?" he asked. "Not really. I'm in honors classes, but so are like 30 other kids. My friend Leo is way better at math than me. And there's this girl Jasmine who taught herself 5 languages just for fun. I'm just okay at a bunch of things." The implications settled over the chamber like a heavy atmosphere. If Maya Torres was merely average among intelligent humans, what did that say about humanity as a whole? Professor Zin-Karath walked across the chamber to stand before the human girl. He performed a gesture of deep respect used only in the most formal coalition ceremonies. "I was wrong," he said clearly, his voice carrying to every corner of the auditorium and broadcasting to billions across the galaxy. "Humanity does not merely deserve membership in the coalition. We should be honored by their presence. I apologize for my arrogance and my blindness." Maya looked even more uncomfortable. "Okay, cool. So can I go get food now? I saw there was a place with something called Vrothian crystal-baked protein clusters, and they looked really good. And just like that, the most important intellectual competition in Coalition history ended with a teenage human girl asking about snacks. I would spend the next several cycles writing my official report about this event. But even then, I knew the words would fail to capture the real truth of what had happened. We had not simply witnessed a competition. We had witnessed the moment when the Coalition realized that humanity was not just another species to add to our records. They were something we had never encountered before, a species that treated the impossible as merely inconvenient, a species that solved problems that should have taken hours in mere seconds, then acted like it was no big deal. A species that scared me, not because they were aggressive or warlike, but because they made the rest of us feel obsolete without even trying. Maya Torres left the chamber eating something from the station's food court, scrolling through her phone, completely unaware that she had just changed the entire political and social landscape of the Galactic Coalition. And that, I realized, was the most terrifying thing of all. They had no idea how remarkable they were, which meant they had not even begun to try yet. The aftermath of Maya Torres's victory spread through Coalition space faster than any communication system could have transmitted it. Within hours, every major network was analyzing the competition. Within days, academic institutions were revising their curricula. Within weeks, the entire Coalition's perspective on humanity had fundamentally shifted. I watched it all unfold from my office on the Central Academic Forum station, compiling reports and fielding inquiries from 17 different sectors. Everyone wanted to understand what had happened. Everyone wanted to know if Maya Torres was truly representative of her species, or if we had simply witnessed an anomaly. The answer came 3 months later, though not in the way anyone expected. Professor Zin-Karath had done something unprecedented. Instead of retreating into isolation after his defeat, he had requested permission to visit Earth, to study at a human educational facility, to understand how they developed minds capable of what Maya had demonstrated. The Coalition approved his request immediately. We were all desperate to understand. I accompanied him as his official observer and chronicler, partly because it was my job, but mostly because I needed to see this for myself. We arrived at a place called Jefferson High School in a city named Portland, located in the northwestern region of the North American continent. The building was aggressively ordinary, rectangular construction, minimal aesthetic consideration, functional design prioritizing efficiency over beauty. It looked like a storage facility for knowledge rather than a temple of learning. Principal Rebecca Walsh met us in her office, a small room filled with papers, books, and something called coffee that smelled both appealing and concerning. "Welcome to Jefferson," she said, shaking our appendages with practiced diplomacy. She had clearly been briefed on proper Coalition etiquette. "We're honored to host you, Professor. Though I have to tell you, Maya's going to be insufferably smug about this whole thing." "She is aware of our visit?" Professor Zin-Karath asked. "Oh yeah, she's been texting her friends about it nonstop. Fair warning, you're probably going to end up in about 1,000 social media posts." Principal Walsh pulled up a schedule on her computer screen. "I've arranged for you to observe several classes, talk with teachers, and interact with students. Maya's agreed to be your guide, though she made me promise you wouldn't make her miss her theater rehearsal." Theater? The human art form involving pretending to be other humans for entertainment purposes. We found Maya in something called a cafeteria, surrounded by other young humans who were consuming various forms of processed nutrients. She waved when she saw us, nearly dropping the sandwich she was eating. "Professor Z!" she called out, using a nickname that made the distinguished genius visible twitch. You actually came. This is wild. Everyone, this is the alien professor I beat in that competition thing. The other humans regarded us with expressions ranging from curiosity to complete indifference. One of them, a tall male with dark skin and elaborate hairstyling, leaned back in his chair. "Maya crushed you, huh?" he said casually. "Yeah, she's annoying like that. I'm Leo, by the way. I sit behind her in calculus and copy her homework." "I let you copy my homework because you help me with Spanish," Maya corrected. "You're terrible at Spanish," a female with bright-colored hair added. "It's honestly embarrassing. I'm Jasmine. I heard you're some kind of super genius from space?" Professor Zin-Karath's expression was difficult to read, but I recognized the signs of cognitive dissonance. These humans treated academic excellence with casual irreverence, acknowledging intelligence while simultaneously treating it as mundane. "I wish to understand your educational system," the professor said carefully. "How you develop students capable of solving problems that should require decades of specialized study." Leo snorted. "Dude, we just go to class and try not to fall asleep. It's not that deep." "But it must be," Professor Zin-Karath insisted. "The level of cognitive ability Maya demonstrated requires intensive training, genetic optimization, cybernetic enhancement. Your species has none of these advantages, yet you produce results that exceed our enhanced individuals." Maya finished her sandwich and wiped her hands on a napkin. "Okay, so I think you're looking at this wrong. We're not smarter than you. We're just different. Your brain works like a really powerful computer, right? Super logical, processes things in order, very precise." "Yes," the professor confirmed. "Human brains are like chaos machines. We make connections that don't make sense. We see patterns in random stuff. We solve problems by basically throwing ideas at them until something sticks. It's not better. It's just weird." Jasmine nodded enthusiastically. "Exactly. I learned Mandarin, Arabic, Russian, Portuguese, and Korean by watching shows and reading fan fiction. No formal classes, no structured curriculum. My brain just absorbed it through sheer obsession with content. That's not smart. That's just how human brains work when we're interested in something." "Your educational system encourages this?" I asked, fascinated. "Not really," Leo said, laughing. "School mostly tries to force us into standardized learning. We succeed despite the system, not because of it. Teachers hate that we can look up any fact on our phones instantly, so they make us memorize stuff instead of teaching us how to think." A teacher walked past our table, an older human female carrying a stack of papers. "I heard that, Leo," she called out, "and you're not entirely wrong, which is why I'm having an existential crisis about my career." The casual acknowledgement of systemic flaws by an authority figure surprised me. In coalition educational systems, such criticism would never be openly expressed. We spent the rest of the day observing classes. Mathematics, where students solved equations while simultaneously messaging each other on concealed devices. Literature, where they analyzed ancient human texts with interpretations that seemed to change based on current social contexts. Science, where they questioned established theories with an aggressive skepticism that bordered on hostility toward accepted facts. In one physics class, a student named Marcus raised his hand during a lecture on thermodynamics. "But doesn't that violate the principle if you account for quantum tunneling effects?" he asked. The teacher, Dr. Kim, paused mid-sentence. "That's actually a really good point. Class, thoughts?" What followed was a 15-minute debate among teenagers about advanced physics concepts, with Dr. Kim occasionally interjecting corrections, but mostly letting them argue it out among themselves. They were wrong about several things, but their willingness to challenge and question everything was startling. "Your students are encouraged to dispute established knowledge?" Professor Zin-Karath asked during a break between classes. Dr. Kim considered the question. "Encouraged is a strong word. But yeah, we try to teach them that science is about questioning, not accepting. The best students are the ones who make me defend my lectures, who find the holes in theories, who ask, 'But what if?' about everything. It's exhausting, but it's how progress happens." In coalition education, students are taught to absorb and replicate the knowledge of masters, the professor said quietly. "We value precision and accuracy over innovation and challenge." "That sounds incredibly boring," Dr. Kim replied bluntly. "How do you discover anything new?" The question hung in the air like a philosophical weapon. That evening, Maya took us to something called a robotics club meeting. 15 students gathered in a workshop filled with mechanical components, tools, and half-assembled machines that looked simultaneously impressive and dangerous. "We're building competition robots," Maya explained. "Teams from different schools face off in challenges. It's super nerdy, but actually pretty fun." I watched as the students worked together, their collaboration chaotic but effective. They argued constantly, debated designs, rejected ideas, proposed alternatives. There was no clear leader, no hierarchical structure. Just organized chaos that somehow produced functional results. One student, a small female named Priya, was programming what appeared to be an autonomous navigation system. "The algorithm keeps failing at corner detection," she announced to the group. "Did you try inverting the sensor array?" someone suggested. "That won't work. The response time is too slow," another argued. "What if we used predictive modeling instead of reactive?" Maya offered. "Ooh, that's actually smart," Priya said, already modifying her code. Professor Zin-Karath watched this exchange with growing fascination. "You are solving a problem that would require a team of specialized engineers in coalition space. You are doing it as a recreational activity." "Well, yeah," Priya said without looking up from her screen. "It's fun. Plus, it looks good on college applications." "Your motivation is education credentials, not the pursuit of knowledge itself." "Both, I guess. I like building stuff and figuring out problems. But also, I want to get into a good engineering program so I can eventually make enough money to not stress about bills. Humans are complicated like that. We contain multitudes." Later that night, back at our accommodations, Professor Zin-Karath sat in contemplative silence for almost an hour. I compiled my notes, reviewing the day's observations, trying to formulate coherent conclusions about what we had witnessed. "I understand now," the professor finally said. "Understand what?" I asked. "Why humanity is dangerous." The word choice startled me. Dangerous? Not in the way I originally assumed. Not because they are aggressive or warlike, though their history suggests capacity for both. They are dangerous because they do not accept limitations. Every other species in the coalition encounters a problem and seeks the proper solution, the correct answer established by precedent and expertise. Humans encounter a problem and assume there must be a different way, a better way, a way no one has tried yet. He gestured toward the window, where Earth rotated peacefully below us. They do not respect the boundaries between disciplines. Maya used automotive repair knowledge to solve a propulsion engineering problem. These students apply philosophy to physics, art to mathematics, chaos to order. They do not know that some things are impossible, so they attempt them anyway. "And often succeed," I added. "Yes, and that terrifies me more than any weapon or fleet, because it means humanity will never be satisfied with what is. They will always push for what could be. The Coalition has spent millennia perfecting our knowledge, refining our understanding, achieving stability and consistency. Humans will destabilize all of it simply by asking why we stopped asking questions. The next morning, Principal Walsh arranged an assembly where Professor Zin-Karath would address the entire student body. Over 800 young humans packed into an auditorium, chattering and laughing, and completely lacking the reverence such an occasion would command in Coalition space. The professor stood at the podium, looking out at the sea of young faces, and began to speak. "I came to your planet, believing I would find the secret to human intelligence. Some hidden training method, some genetic advantage, some explanation for abilities that should not exist in a species so young and unmodified. I found something far more unsettling. I found that you do not consider yourselves special at all." The students quieted, paying attention now. "You treat remarkable intelligence as ordinary. You approach impossible problems as inconvenient. You challenge authority as recreation. You learn for entertainment. You create for amusement. And you do all of this while complaining about being tired and hungry and bored. You are extraordinary beings who refuse to be impressed by your own extraordinariness." Some students laughed. Others looked confused. Maya, sitting in the third row, was definitely taking a video on her phone. 3 months ago, Maya Torres defeated me in intellectual competition while treating it as an IPU, interruption of more important activities. I was humiliated. I was angry. I was convinced she must represent the absolute peak of human capability. Then I came here and discovered she is, by your standards, simply a good student. Not the best, not a prodigy, just good. This revelation is more devastating than any defeat. Professor Zin-Karath's 4 eyes swept across the audience. The Coalition has existed for 73,000 of your years. We have achieved stability, prosperity, peace. We have accumulated vast knowledge, refined our sciences, perfected our arts. And in doing so, we have become static. We preserve what we have built rather than building anything new. We have mistaken the absence of regression for the presence of progress. He paused, letting his words settle. You will change everything, not through conquest or force, but simply by being yourselves, by questioning what we accept, by attempting what we consider impossible, by refusing to be limited by what has already been achieved. You will destabilize 73,000 years of careful construction, and you will do it while making jokes and complaining about homework. The auditorium was completely silent now. I came here to learn your secrets. Instead, I learned that you have no secrets. You are simply humans being human, and that is terrifying enough. Welcome to the Coalition. We are all going to have to work much harder now. The students erupted in applause and cheers. They probably thought it was a compliment. They did not understand that Professor Zin-Karath had just issued a warning to the entire galaxy. Humanity had arrived, and nothing would ever be the same. As we prepared to leave Earth, Maya found us at the transport station. She handed Professor Zin-Karath a small package wrapped in colorful paper. "What is this?" he asked. "A gift. It's kind of a human thing." "Open it." Inside was a book. The Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy, by someone named Douglas Adams. "It's funny science fiction," Maya explained, "about humans and aliens and space travel and philosophy and stuff. I figured you might enjoy it. Plus, there's this whole thing about the answer to life being 42, and I thought you'd appreciate the absurdity of that." Professor Zin-Karath held the book carefully, as if it were something precious. "Thank you, Maya Torres, for this gift, and for teaching me humility. No problem, Professor Z. Try not to work too hard. Life's too short to be serious all the time. She waved as we boarded the transport. Come back and visit sometime. We're doing a musical next semester, and I got cast as the lead. You should totally come see it. As Earth shrunk in the viewport behind us, I turned to Professor Zin-Karath. What will you do now? He opened the book Maya had given him, scanning the first page. I will return to the Coalition and tell everyone what I learned. That humanity does not threaten us with superior intelligence or advanced technology. They threaten us with something far more powerful. The refusal to accept that anything is finished, anything is final, or anything is impossible. And then I will try to learn how to be more like them, to question more, accept less, and perhaps remember that knowledge pursued with joy is more valuable than knowledge accumulated from obligation. He smiled, an expression that looked unusual on his features, but genuine nonetheless. Maya Torres defeated me in 9 seconds, but it took me 3 months to understand that the victory was never about intelligence. It was about approach, about attitude, about refusing to be impressed by complexity, and instead finding simplicity on the other side of it. I made notes in my report, knowing that historians would analyze this moment for generations. The day the Coalition learned that humanity's greatest strength was not what they could do, but how they thought about doing it. The transport accelerated toward Coalition space, carrying us back to a civilization that would never be quite the same. Behind us, on a small blue planet, 800 high school students returned to their classes, completely unaware that they had just redefined the future of galactic civilization. Maya Torres probably went to theater rehearsal, complained about being hungry, and texted her friends about the weird alien professor who had visited. And somehow, that was the most human thing of all.